Hello and welcome, it's Fiona from Weekly Sewing Bee. Now I've got here 2 bits of scrap and I plan to make a little bowl to put nuts in. One of the big problems about hosting Christmas at my house is that I just don't have enough little bowls. Well, it's not the only problem. I don't have enough chairs either, but you know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one of those little trays that fold flat. I've got a leftover piece of fabric here, and I've also got a sample of fabric. So all I'm doing is sewing around the outside. Very simple. And I'm going to sew 90% of the way round, and then I'm going to turn it inside out. Very simple. In fact, I could actually switch the camera off. So when I've turned it inside out, I'm going to push these corners through, and because one of these is quite a thick piece of upholstery fabric, I'm going to snip these corners before I go. So there we go, I've got my hole to turn it inside out. Now, because I want my corners as sharp as possible, I can then take my scissors and I can couple of millimetres, just so that I've got a fighting chance of getting these nice and sharp round the other way. Now, of course, what I could have done is I could have cut these whilst I cut it out, and you can see how roughly I've cut it out. But it means that I would have to sew slower, and I really didn't want to do that. I just wanted to get it done, and this really is a 5-minute make, so maybe I should have given myself a bigger hole. I'm going to close my scissors because that way I don't have a point that will push through, and I'm just going to tidy up these corners. There we go. Now, getting hold of free fabric samples is supposed to be easy. I must admit, I don't like doing it, but then if a friend says, oh, I've got some free samples, do you want them? Then I always say yes. But you are supposed to be able to ask for them from upholstery companies and everything else like that. I just think that businesses have such a hard time surviving nowadays that if they are keeping crafters on the go, then maybe it won't help them. Okay, so yes, I always accept them off friends, but I never ask for them myself. I know, isn't that terrible? So here we go. I've now turned it inside out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this flat, I'm going to tuck those floofy bit in, and I'm going to do a layer of top stitch. Okay. Now, you can choose whichever layer you think is going to be the easiest to sew. Now, I think my sewing machine is going to have a better time of it if it grips the bottom layer. If I put the thicker layer at the bottom, because it will grip it better. But that is just my opinion, and I'm sure if I put the taffeta side down, then it will be just as fine. So I've sewn up the hole and I've started doing my top stitch. I've pushed out my corners as well as I'm able to, considering it's quite fat fabric, and I've continued to sew round. Now, if you don't want to do the row of top stitch and it's quite a flat material, oh, I'm just going to change my bobbin. Hi, so welcome back. Finished sewing around the outside and just trim those off. Now, I want the taffeta on the inside. There's no reason behind it, and you could do it however you wanted. I must admit that you would probably see more of the inside than you would the outside. And now we need to decide how big we want our bowl. And it is really a decision if we want quite a deep bowl and quite small, then we would have to take more of these corners. But if we wanted it quite shallow and quite deep, then we could just take off a little bit of the corners. I know, so I'm sort of going for medium. So I am going to decide how far I want to sew. Now, there's loads of ways we can do this. I'm going to do the first stitch, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it in the sewing machine, and I'm going to mark it with a marker. You can also get a post-it note and mark it. Just put a post-it note from where you want it to go. But it really is, as long as all 4 of these corners are sewn the same, then the bowl will look right. If one corner was bigger, then it would be a problem. And then it's a simple matter of folding these corners. I've got those ends lined up. I can then line it up underneath my sewing machine so I can see where I'm going to sew. Now the fabric is not actually ever going to touch those lines, so it's not going to get a mark on the fabric. And you know, it's just, you have to find a way of measuring it. I have also done this with a piece of paper. I've cut a triangle out and then I've kept the triangle. It is kind of disappears and falls on the floor every now and again, but you know, that's just me. So I'm under number 3 and just doing number 4, lining my lines up, and there we go. And of course you can mark with a pin. Now I know it's not just that I'm lazy that I don't mark with a pin. I find that if you do things like that, then you get far too reliant on them, and then if there is a mistake in the pinning, you don't even look before you sew and you just sew that mistake in. So that's why it's kind of like to make me check that I don't do it. Alright, now I've already said that this will fold flat for storage. I think I interrupted myself when I was going around the top seam, and I said that if you didn't want to do the top seam, well that's fine, you could just hand sew the hole in. The only reason I do that is just to give it a bit of structural integrity and decoration really. So, and for personal reasons, it's quicker for me to sew than it is for me to do anything else. Now, there's not very many nuts left, but that's not the problem. I have now got a very easy, very quick, even with me waffling on, we've only been up here 10 minutes, bowl for my nuts. I can put that away quite easily for storage, and because, you know, nuts are wrapped in their own shell, I don't really need to worry about lining it with paper or anything. Alright, thank you for watching. My name's Fiona from Weekly Sewing Bee.